Okay, in the past couple of shurim, we spoke about all kinds of reasons why you should maybe be allowed to use milk without Yid watching it. Primarily two reasons, Kashrus and Ramosha. And now we're going to talk about something that we just started on last time. We just opened up the door to it last time, which is how do we decide which countries to apply the kula, particularly what Ramosha said, to which countries we should apply that and say Chalav Stam from that country is good enough. So Ramosha was talking about the United States, and that's one extreme, one extreme. And we all understand that his tshuva wouldn't apply if we went to Afghanistan. You couldn't go there and get milk from the neighborhood shepherd and drink milk from him. But there's a political question, but there are about 190 other countries in the world, okay? And it's political how many countries there are. Okay, there's about 190 other countries in the world. So how does a person decide where he's allowed to eat? Okay, that question is negated to three groups of people. That question is negated to the people who live in those countries. Okay, if you're living someplace, if you live in Argentina and you want to drink the local milk, that's your shiloh, you live there. It's again to someone who goes traveling. If you go to Barbados and you want to drink milk while you're on vacation, that's a question you think you're not a local, but you're becoming, so to speak, a local. And what's again most to us, which is what we're going to talk about, is what happens if one of those countries wants to ask for hashgacha on the product. They have a farm in the middle of wherever, in the middle of Chile, in the middle of Russia, China, India, any one of these places, and they want to make a dairy product, and they want to have hashgacha on that. So then it's not going to be Chalav Yisrael. If it's going to be Chalav Stam, can we accept it or not? So
it's imported into this country.
Well, it's not only if it's imported. We'll get to that also, but they're asking for hashgacha. Okay, so the question is what they're going to do with it, whether we should give hashgacha or not. So the truth is, really, the best person to answer these questions, the people who understand things the best, really is the local Rabbanim. The Rav in Argentina, we know, understands his market much better than we do. What do we know from understanding Argentina? But that said, we're going to look at it not from the side of the locals. We're looking more from for the people who are sending to the United States, or the guys who are really asking us for hashgacha. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about is that I've been, with someone's help, working on this for a while, and asked. I came out and speaking to different people who are involved in this kind of work, 4 different approaches for how to deal with this. Okay, four different approaches to how to decide which country you should be allowed to take milk from. Okay, number 1. Okay, we're going to go from the most liberal or lenient to the opposite extreme. Okay, the first is this one comes. Now, the 2 people told me this independently. Both people work in hashgacha. Both of them told me they never heard this from a person. Okay, so this is just their own feeling. Okay, and they said, look, if someone's making product, and let's say in India they're making a dairy product, and they're shipping it to the United States. Well, we're accepting milk in the United States because the government tells us that it's milk. That's what Moshe said, the government. So if the government lets them import milk from India, the government must be convinced that it's good enough. They said, if we're trusting the government, and Moshe said, trust the government. Well, if we're trusting the government, if the government thinks that you could take milk from India, they must know what they're talking about. So just like they say you can take milk from Wisconsin, that's good enough. So they think milk from India should be just as good also.
All right, so that only answers one part of the question, which is if it's imported.
That's all right. That would first of all only answer for import. That's mainly our focus is for importing. That's what we're mainly thinking about. But it seems to me that they missed the point. Okay, Ramosha didn't say that the government is the person who is an aide who can tell us that the milk is kosher milk. That's not what he said. Ramosha said was the government's oversight creates an anan sahadi. Well, what does those words mean? Anan sahadi means we are the aidim. We are so confident that's what it is that everybody can tell that this is cow's milk. So it only works if what the government did Taka gives us that confidence that we walk away saying, yeah, I really know that this stuff is from a cow. It's not that the government, we don't trust the government. It's that the government oversight, we know what the government does in Wisconsin, and they make sure that the milk all comes from cows, so therefore that gives us the confidence, and we say, anan sahadi, that it's cow's milk. Well, if you don't feel like that from a country, just because they let you import it, who knows why they let it? Either they.
Well, it's the same thing. Wouldn't it be the same thing?
That what?
The government said the same oversight on the milk, on the domestic milk would be the same. They would only let product that meets those standards into the country.
So,
same as Saudi.
but it's not the truth. In other words, let me take to that. But besides that, it's not the truth. First of all, they don't have that oversight in other countries that they have in the United States. But
do they test the milk when it comes in? They do testing wherever it is?
So, let's take this. In the United States, we're not saying that because the government did something, therefore we believe what the government said. We're saying is, because what the government did, we are confident that we're getting cow's milk.
Right.
So that means is we can't just judge it we can't only judge it and say, does the government accept it? We have to say did that give us that confidence? Did we walk away being...
You're not explaining why you would not have that confidence.
We just don't.
Why saying that? Why? We just don't. Why? If the government is allowing this milk in, it obviously meets the government standard. So even though granted, they might not be actively testing milk in the United States because they've set up guidelines wherever it is, so they don't need that. But if they're importing milk, and this milk they actually are testing, so it should create the same amount of Saudi.
I don't believe that me, as an American citizen, feels as comfortable when they're importing something from, if they took something in from out in the middle of no place, from if they brought in milk from Afghanistan, so you would say, well, if the government decided, then it must be good enough. And I say, well, maybe there's a political reason why they decided it. Maybe there's other things. Maybe they're overall more lax that comes in from out of the United States than what goes on.
Is that true?
Yeah, that is. So they're not, okay.
And because health and safety reasons?
We're not talking about health and safety. We're talking about whether it's cow's milk. Our focus is how much do they care that they're getting cow's milk? They're not, okay. David believes in this first, so he can go home. He's finished. Okay, next. Okay, the second one, which this one comes in the name of great people, and that is this. I heard this from, and it's been repeated by many people, but I heard it. I went to talk to him again, email him recently about it, and that's from Pinchas Goldschmidt. Okay, he's the chief rabbi of Moscow, and he says the following. He says that he became the chief rabbi of Moscow in, I believe it was 1993. Okay, and when he went to Russia, or when he was in there, when he was already there, he asked Rosh Hashanah, he said to him, tell me, what should I tell the Bali Tshuva living in Russia about drinking the milk here, the local milk? Can I tell them that where Moshe said that you could drink milk in America, can I tell them the same thing could apply to the local milk in Russia? That's what he asked them. So he says over that what Rosh Hashanah told him said, if there's a law on the books in Russia that says that milk has to come from a cow, then they can drink the milk. Then Ramosha would allow you to drink the milk. Okay? That's how he repeat that Ramosha told him that Rosh Hashanah told him that's what it depends on. There's a law in the books. So some people take that as he said it, as it is. They go to the country. They say you want to get milk from. You pick a name of a remote country. You want to go to that country. You take it. Go read the regulations, turn the pages. If you can find, in India you'll find pages and pages of regulations that say that the milk has come from a cow. If you find those regulations that it says that, you're in business. As long as there's some place in an office, someplace there's a book, it says it on the book, we don't care what they do with that law. As long as it says it someplace on the books, that's good enough. So, we have a bunch of questions on that. To take it at face value gives us a bunch of questions. First of all, what I just asked you last time, which is, if they're not enforcing the law, if there's no one paying any attention to it, where's the Anand Sahadi? Anand Sahadi doesn't come because there's a law. Just because they put something down on paper, what does that mean anything? I mean, there are laws that are not enforced, and no one pays any attention to it.
So what about today in the United States, where there's all kinds of money issues that they don't even have the inspectors to go around to the farms or to the factories. So then either everything you just said and what you said the last couple of weeks is absolutely irrelevant, doesn't mean a thing, or what you just said just now is that you can believe it anywhere. I mean,
okay. So we hope, or we believe, that the inspection hasn't gotten to such a point that it's completely hefker. You know what I mean? That even with the sequester going on, that things haven't gotten so pathetic that we don't think there's any oversight. And what we spoke about other times was that even a little oversight would do the trick here in the United States. But if there's nobody, the fact that just because the law would be on the books with nobody paying any attention would mean anything.
You're assuming that no one's paying attention.
No, I didn't. No. I didn't think no one could take. I'm saying if you. But this criteria says is I only care if there's law in the book. That's all I care.
You're trying to be mechanic between the United States and other countries in the way that they have laws and we have laws. When we have a law that you can only have cow's milk, so then the United States makes sure that they're. But if a country like Afghanistan has the law, they're not really going to care.
I didn't say that. No, I didn't say that. I said this. I said
one's a non-Saudi, one's a non.
If the criteria is. The only criteria is if there's a law, not whether it's enforced. That means it's right to go to a place where they don't enforce the laws. You're willing to accept it as long as it says it on a piece of paper.
That's because you assume that when there are laws, there are methods to enforce the law.
So you're saying...
So again, so Mike, if in America they stopped enforcing the law, which some people want to claim, right? So then there is no real oversight, there is no real enforcement. So the same thing would apply in America.
Yes. I'm saying
we're not doing that.
I'm saying if you're telling me the criteria is are they enforcing the laws? But that's fine. He's saying if the criteria is if there is a law, I don't care.
Hand in hand. I'm saying if a country has a law, obviously it's assumed that.
No, they don't. So many laws that are flagrantly violated all the time. Some more, some less. Some laws are on the books nobody cares two hoots about. Laws have been in the books for 50 years and nobody's never looked at it, nobody's prosecuted. All kinds of levels of laws. It has to do, people interest. Exactly,
So America. So we fight.
That's true. But if you're making,
but it's in America. It's not a problem. America, they're very concerned about
it. Depends on who you ask.
Well, all right, you're right. Okay,
if you ask someone else, they'll tell you that no, it's not enforced, it's not checked.
Okay, so what I'm arguing on this theory, which is that we only care if there's a law. We don't at all pay attention to whether they enforce the law. Okay, so within what Rav Moshe said, to say Rav Moshe said this, it's hard to believe because the second tshuva Rav Moshe, the first tshuva he says that there's an anantahadi. Came along the second tshuva and the person said to him, wait a second, but do you know that there's really, really small fines? Did you know that the fines are so small for using other kinds of milk? So that was the person's second question. So how can you tell me there's an anantahadi? Sure doesn't seem like anybody. This law doesn't have very much teeth to it. To which Rav Moshe gave his answer, and we're going to get in a second talk more about what his answer was. But listen to the whole question. The whole question is saying not like this. If the rule was it just depends if there's a law on the books, what do I care what the punishment is for not following the law? If all I care about is there's in the regulations someplace that says you're not allowed to do it, then I should care. What do I care? How much the fine is? What do I care? How much anybody pays attention? The whole point of the second tshuva is to say is no, there does have to be a certain amount of enforcement. And Rav Moshe is talking about whether what the person claimed how much the fines are. That's good enough. Okay. Now it could be that really. It could be that Rosh Hashanah didn't mean it as radically as the way Rabbi Goldschmidt is saying it. Okay? The way Rabbi Goldschmidt, the way he presents it is just that if there's a law on the books, that's it. You go to Zimbabwe, and if in Zimbabwe there's a law that says it has to be from a cow, then that's good enough. It could be that Rosh Hashanah was looking at the truth. The Soviet Union had just fallen a few years back. Right? It fell in 1991. So he looked and he says, in a place like Russia, I understand that people are afraid of the government, and they do what they're supposed to do. If there are laws like that, they wouldn't break the law because they're afraid of being punished. And what he answered Rabbi Goldschmidt was just a technicality, which is, if there is no law that says it has to be from a cow, then no one cares one bit. You do whatever you want to. He had to clarify a technicality. Of course, I know that in this country, people are going to follow those kind of laws. It's that kind of a society. You looked at Russia, you know what kind of place it was. But he was, tell me, is there a law on the books? If there's a law on the book, then you can eat it, because what he didn't speak out was, if there's a law on the books, then I understand they're going to follow the law. I understand it's that kind of a society that it's a lawful society, or the people are afraid of the government, and therefore they're going to follow the law. So when he said to him, could you tell me, is there a law on the books? That was just taking care of a detail. Would it have been in a different country, he might have asked the same question. And I said this from Kosher, and he said, yeah, Ken's saying that's what he meant. That could be that's what he meant. He wanted to make sure I got that point clear, but he understood that was sort of behind the scenes was he was looking at the truth. We all know what was going on. People were at least in those days, in Russia, people followed the law. People were afraid of the government, so it was okay. Now, it could be.
What other kind of situation do you have? There's democracies and socialist countries and dictatorships. So in all those kinds of countries, people are either in democracies. I would say that even democracies are less likely to follow the law than dictatorships or communist countries.
It depends on society. We're going to get more. You'll see pictures soon. We'll see.
There's governments that are just very weak. Like in Mexico, where just Yashar It's not a strong government. It's not a question was a dictatorship, was it,
Okay.
the Wild West.
It could be. I'm going to skip a part here, but there's another way to understand Reb Shlomo Zalman that maybe there's another possibility that maybe he really meant, so to speak, what Rabbi Goldschmidt says. Okay, but the truth is, most people don't take Reb Shlomo Zalman at least at face value. Maybe they'll say the way I said it. Maybe they'll say other ways, but they don't take it at face value. That all we need to do is just find a piece of paper that says all milk has to come from cow. What do they say in America? It's the mammary exclusion of what does it say? Whatever. There's a whole way that they describe it. In the legal way of saying it, it comes from a cow. Okay, that's the third. The third way of looking at it is this. This is the way. This is the way Rebelsky holds at this point. Is how he decides what you should do or not. A lot of what I'm going to say to you of Rebelsky's opinion is through my correspondence with Rabbi Gersten, who's been talking to him about it. And he says like this. So he gave a few examples to try to help us get sort of like a rule out of it. He says, if you go to certain countries where they milk other animals, like Saudi Arabia milks camels and Mongolia milks horses, you can't take milk from those places. You can't take cow's milk from those places. Too much of a chashash that they're mixing it. He says, China's a place we don't trust them. We're not confident that that the government is really doing anything. We don't have such confidence. We can't take milk from China. No. We can't take, and he says, and his other example, you'll see, I'm going to bring it up again later, he says if you go to a place like Rwanda, like in the middle of Africa, places where there's no law, you can't take it from those places either. Okay? Now, we have a little question here because, in fact, OU does certify products in China. That's a good question. We know the answer to that. Okay, but anyhow, that's what he said. And one of his examples of places you shouldn't take from was China. Okay. He says, now, let's move to different kind of countries. He says is Poland and India. Those are two very important countries for our whole discussion here. Poland and India, be'etzem, have weak governments. Be'etzem, the government is not enforcing, is not as powerful or as strong as we would want it to be to give us so much confidence. He says, but those two countries each have economic reasons why the dairy industry is so important that they're very particular about the dairy industry. They have, even though they may not be so particular about lots of other things, these two things, the dairy industry is very important to them. It's a big export for them to Europe and the United States, and therefore they're very particular about the thing. They have even stronger enforcement than they do for other things, and therefore you can accept them there. And then he said, South America also, there's a lot of corruption in the governments there. But a Rav in South America, I don't know if it's related to here, but a Rav in South America told him that the only thing they have is cows, there's no trained animals around, and therefore you have nothing to worry about. So he said South America has no problems. Okay. So Rebelsky's trying to say is, listen, just hear what he's trying to say before we ask some questions. What he's trying to say is that having the law doesn't do the trick. Just having the law doesn't mean anything. But we care if they enforce the law. But he's going like country by country. He's looking at it and saying as well, let's see whether in these different countries do they enforce the laws. And they may not enforce other laws, but we're going to figure out that they enforce dairy laws, or there's special reasons why we should be samachan. Okay.
I want to say something, but tell me your point.
Say something.
I said, okay. I'm looking at it a different perspective. I think things change a lot since then. Perspective is concerning the reputation of the company. In other words, what they have is basically a co-op. What would it be if all of a sudden the word went out, so they're mixing in other types of products? They're basically going to lose their business because of that. Someone actually told me that. That's very, very important. So it really depends on each country. Like also nowadays, things are much more transparent. If you go on Amazon, it's so important to the company, the comments that people say.
Okay, so
let's look at it from that perspective.
I have two responses to what you said. You're correct. Two responses. First of all, when I spoke to Rabbi Heinemann about it, we'll get into Rabbi Heinemann in a second. When I spoke to him about it, he said he thinks if Moshe would have been writing his Shulchan nowadays, he wouldn't have written Anan Sahadi because of the government. He would have written Anan Sahadi because, for business reasons, people want to make sure that they only give cows milk because of the reputation. Exactly what you said. He thought that was, nowadays that's a more of a convincing argument than the government. But the other thing is that part of what you're saying is because we live in America, and in America, that's the culture. It's so important for my business to be successful that I know I'm going to lose my customers if I don't do whatever and whatever. Therefore, I'll do whatever it is to be straight because or else I'm going to lose my customers. That's our culture. That other countries don't have the same attitude. They don't have the same mentality of how to look at things. And for them, that might not be a driving force. That might be, I'm going to make a buck today, and what happens tomorrow is tomorrow. I'll deal with it tomorrow. You know? So that might be true, and we have to know what we're dealing with. When we go to places that are whole different worlds, it may not be like that. Okay. Okay, so we have a few things to ask us. First is, what Rebelsky's saying, his reasons that he's saying, sound very much like what the Pre-Chodesh said. The Pre-Chodesh said that if you have a country or an area that the people don't have any incentive to cheat, we have reasons to think that they wouldn't do it, there's no treif animals around, that those are all things Pre-Chodesh says, then in that case, there's no takonos chachama. Rav Moshe was trying to go past the Pre-Chodesh. Rav Moshe was trying to say is that even some sofer who argue that it's a takana would still be making in the United States. So Rebelsky saying is bordering on really what the Pre-Chodesh says. We have to just think about it. Did he say enough to convince us that it should qualify for what Rav Moshe said? Okay, the next is, these kind of judgments, okay, when you talk about the judgments that we just heard, all these different kind of ways of judging a country is or is not okay, really is the kind of thing that takes tremendous amount of research to do this. This is the kind of thing that is, there are people out there, that's what they do. They research and understand the political and economic and social reasons of things going on in countries, and they make these decisions. So, we don't know what went on and how he made that decision, but it would seem like, if you want to rely on something like that, you need a strong basis for saying that. Maybe they had that. But I'm saying it's something that needs to be constantly reviewed. These things change all the time. So we need to, Russia in 1990 is not Russia in 2010.
And Russia is a very big place.
Right, it's a big place. That's correct. It's a country.
Russia in the, Ukraine. In the who knows where.
That's correct. So it's
not Russia.
Russia.
Okay, but out in the middle in the sticks someplace, it's, so it's true. This kind of stuff needs a tremendous amount of thinking and probably that belongs out of the realm of a base measures. It belongs by other kinds of people who have a different perspective, who understand these things that are not. If you want to, and of course you realize what that means is that if today's expert says that India is good because they enforce the laws, and in 5 years from now the economics changes, then we have to stop giving our stuff, and you have to keep on thinking this over and make sure that what your basis is really keeps being true. Okay. Okay, one more prat in this, just looking in the South American prat, which is that they don't have treif animals. I just want to make a point, which is, in the United States, cows are milked mechanically. Okay, the cow pulls up to the thing, they stick on whatever the machine is called, and they milk the cows. In the United States, you can't even buy machinery to milk other animals. So in the United States, we feel comfortable saying nobody's going to milk a horse because to milk a horse, I don't mean privately, commercially, you'd be doing it by hand. There's no way to do that. Compared to milking a cow, nobody would, when he was looking at a cow that he could stick the machine onto, and a horse that he has to do it by hand, commercially, that's not a viable choice.
What? Won't fit into a horse.
Right, no, it's built for cows. It's the size of a cow. When you put it onto a cow, it fits. It doesn't fit onto a horse. So, on a commercial level, in the United States, that's not a viable choice. But in other countries, they milk all their animals by hand. That's the way they work. They milk by hand. So then, having a horse around is just as good of a choice as having a cow around. The way we look at it, that we approach it and say nobody would milk a horse over here, that's because commercially, you couldn't get a truckload full of horses milked. It would take you all day. For us, that's not kedai. Nobody would do that. It's not a sensible choice. But if I'm milking my cows by hand, I throw in a couple of horses, what's the difference? It's the same work for me. That doesn't change. Okay.
Now. Depends if the zebra is kosher now.
If what?
If the zebra is kosher now.
Because?
Because how the animal.
Yeah, it's kosher. Don't worry about that. That's not a problem. Okay. Now, also, there are, I'm going to use the word again, cultural differences between countries as follows. In the United States, I'm going to give you as an example. In the United States, the law is that, we all know this, that the law is that casein is not considered dairy. Casein is a milk protein. It's not considered dairy. That's a law. For whatever reason.
What's the reason? Maybe you could share with us now.
The theory is that the casein is not dairy. It's a political decision that the dairy farmers didn't want casein, which mainly comes from out of the United States, to be considered dairy, because dairy is considered a positive attribute. So if you could put something that contains milk or milk products, that would be positive. They didn't want the foreign countries to do it. They got the government to say casein is not dairy, so you can't say it contains like milk or something's in it because it doesn't contain milk. Casein just became.
And whey is similar.
Whey is milk. No, whey is dairy.
Whey is dairy.
Yes, because whey is an American product. Okay. Anyhow,
is that how the casein is outside of America?
Yes, primarily, almost completely out of the United States. So whatever the reason is, it's a political decision was that casein is not dairy. Even though it comes from milk, of course it comes from milk, but it's not. It's politically it's considered it's not legally it's not dairy, and that affects tax laws, it affects all kinds of regulations. There's dairy regulations, and then there's casein regulations, and they're not the same. They don't follow the same. So we're in the United States, and we know that difference. Okay, well, what is going on in other countries? Other countries have different ways of doing business. Maybe they have other differences that play into Chalav Stam. Meaning, does anybody know in the United States if we would care that casein has come from cow's milk? If you want to sell something as milk, it has to come from a cow. If you want to sell something as casein, does it have to come from a cow? I don't know. In other words, America, casein and milk are not in the same group. They're in two different things. So we don't treat them the same. So maybe in other countries, we have to understand really what they're doing in order to say, I'm going to take it from that country. They have to be sort of on the same wavelength as us to be able to say, or you have to understand enough to say, I'm taking it from that country because they enforce the laws.
It's all based on Ramesh's sheet that the challah is told in the milk we're getting from, not the original. But that's when the milk for the casein, if we say it was mutter then.
If it was, no, I think maybe the government doesn't even care. Oh, because your guy's milk is... he's milking a horse. So there's nothing wrong with milking your horse. You just can't sell it as milk. If I'm turning it into casein, maybe they don't care if I turn it into casein. Okay, and the one last part within this thing is, we dealt with a company in Morocco. Okay? This company was making cakes, and in the cake, if I remember, it was cakes, and in the cake was milk powder. So, the United States has regulations that say what milk powder has to be, and presumably that means it has to come from a cow. And let's even say that if they imported milk powder from Morocco, it would have to be from a cow also. Do they have the same hakpadas? If you're using it locally, you can take the milk powder, put it into a product, and then ship that product to the United States. But if you're selling it as milk powder in the United States, there are certain hakpadas. Let's say there are hakpadas. Do they care if they use it as a sub-ingredient? If they don't, then if you're giving hashgacha in Morocco on the milk powder, you have to say, no, I'm only giving hashgacha if you ship the milk powder straight to the United States. But if you keep the milk powder here and use it locally, then it doesn't have hashgacha on it. Okay, of course, that's ridiculous. Okay, you can't give hashgacha like that. But if maybe the hakpadas are only for things that, we say in Poland, they're very makbid about dairy products because they do a lot of export of that product. So maybe they're makbid when the dairy leaves Poland as dairy. If it leaves Poland within a drink, maybe they're not being makbid on it because it's not going out as dairy and nobody cares about that anyhow. Okay, well, now to our fourth. I know we're running late. Let's go. We'll keep on moving. We're on our fourth one. We're getting to the movie soon. Okay, we're on our fourth one. Okay, and that is, this is the way Rabbi Heinemann approaches it. When he looks at this, and he says his way is, to me, the most straightforward, and most what you would, so to speak, expect. And he says like this. He says, you can only accept Chalav Stam from countries where the government enforces the law. There isn't corruption. Overall, the society is a lawful country. Overall, it's a lawful country is lawful. And when he was saying this, he specifically picked out 3 countries to say that he didn't think they should take him. The Stark he doesn't give hashgacha to: Mexico, India, and China. Okay, those are 3 countries that he didn't think met his criteria, and those are the ones that are most hot button issues. Those are the most ones that there's debate about that some hashgachas take from and some don't. So.
You wouldn't take from those circumstances. You wouldn't take from the United States either.
Because?
Just because of the reasons you said that he would.
So I guess it depends what part of the radio dial you listen to. But you say that, right? That depends on who you think. We're going to see more about the United States in 1 second. Okay, just hold a second.
Sure.
And the Ramosha said, what he's saying is, Ramosha said, we have an Anan Sahadi, if the government makes sure that it's cow's milk, that's what it is. So we have to make sure the government's doing that. If you're in a place where people don't follow the law, people can pay somebody off. It's like part of business. It's just, another business expenses to pay off the officials. That's just part of what you do. Then you pay for garbage disposal, and you pay the mafia, and you pay the government. What's the difference? So then you can't take food from it. You can't take Chalav Stam from it. Now, most people, if you ask, so to speak, people in the street, okay, knowledgeable people, they would guess that would be the simple understanding of what Ramesh had in mind. You have to look at the country. So now, the other hashgachas, the London Bezdin, my understanding is roughly follows this shita, let's say roughly. And the OK told it to me straight out. They gave me a list of countries that they've taken milk from. That list was United States and Canada, Western Europe, Australia, New Zealand, and they said other countries on that level, okay, which means is those are the kind of countries, the truth is those are the biggest exporters of dairy to the United States, but those are the countries that we have a sort of a feeling that they're similar structure and standards and way of doing business that we do.
How
Okay.
Mexico?
They do not take Mexico.
Don't take Mexico?
They don't take Mexico. That's the example. Okay, so, so taking this, assuming this position, so now I'm trying to think like this. Okay, so this is all, we're still a little bit being couch politicians. Okay, we're sitting here trying to decide this. You know, they're going to, if I have to tell you something, they said they take Western Europe. Let's think, okay, they take Western Europe. Okay, what do you think about Italy? Okay, well, it's Italy. So sitting here in America, a lot of us think, well, Italy is, yeah, like Mexico, Italy, France, Kosher is the same thing. Well, it's not exactly. In Europe, Italy is considered Southern Europe. Okay, Italy and Greece are not Western Europe. They're so Western and Southern Europe are not the same kind of thing.
The Western mentality did not mean Western.
No, he actually meant Western. No, it's true because Italy is not Western Europe. It's called Southern Europe. No,
It's still the Western mentality.
right.
It's not Poland. It's not Russia.
You'll see in a second. Okay, we'll get.
So
what I mean is that we. So I thought is that we needed. A more scientific or objective way of looking at it. Okay, and what I'm going to show you here is my idea of how you should do it objectively. My point really for what I'm showing you is not that you should say, oh my gosh, that's the greatest thing. I'm not trying to tell you that you should therefore follow this criteria. My idea is to show you that there is a way to measure this objectively, measure it by a standard of someone, not a bunch of people who get our information from the internet. And say, okay, this is how we measured it, and is the country qualified or not? And what I mean is, when we have to deal with a far-off country that we never heard of, okay, if you wanted to go, if a person said, I'm going on vacation to Chile, okay, so should he take milk? I don't know anything about Chile, okay? Hope you're not insulted of it. I don't know anything about Chile. But, so how would I decide that? How would I know whether we should take milk or we shouldn't take milk? So this sort of objective way is trying to help us do that, okay? Okay, so now, to work on this, we started with government. The government has data on which countries export products to the United States. Remember, we think about the hashgacha part. Okay, so there's a bunch.
What program is this?
This is PowerPoint. Yeah, this is a bunch of. These are the countries, the ones that are now white. These bunch of countries export casein to the United States. Okay, and these bunch of countries, we're now up to. You'll see this whole list is 33 countries here that export casein and other dairy products to the United States. It's split. In government data, it's split casein from other dairy products. So these 33 countries are exporting casein and other dairy products to the United States. Okay, everyone here who's in white. Okay, now, now using that, so now we know the name of these are the countries we're looking at, these 33 countries. Okay, I used two different barometers of how well people do oversight of government's oversight. Okay, I used two different people who make these decisions. One is a place called the World Governance Indicator, okay, the rule of law, and the other one is called the World Justice Project. They also have a rule of law. Okay, each one of them is going to measure all the countries in the world based on how they meet these criteria. Okay, that's what they're doing. So we took these two groups of people, and I reformulated their numbers. Their numbers are not 1 to 100, right? I reorganized their numbers to be 1 to 100.
Who runs these organizations?
These are like
government organizations?
No, these are non-government organizations. Right. These
are like leftists and stuff like that.
Some of them, okay. Yes, I'm not saying that necessarily these, but most these people are what they're doing is like this. If you read through their paperwork, they're going to experts of each country and saying to us, tell us, answer questions or give us information about the country. And of course, they might be picking the wrong people to ask the questions.
Well, you know, the UN report that said that the medical level in Cuba is basically the same as the United States. US was 37 and Cuba was 38.
Okay.
That's crazy. Okay. So what they used, they came to that because the level they measured, they took into effect the level of equality. In Cuba, it's equally lousy and horrible. So, but the equality is very.
So I
have to know what.
So I did. Yes. So I did. In the ones that I picked, I didn't take their straight number. In the breakdowns of how they get to their numbers, I read through the breakdowns to try to find the one that seemed to measure what we wanted most. In other words, in this one, I took factors 6.1 and 6.2 of maybe 10 factors each with many sub-factors. I said, this factor looks like it's the one that measures what we're looking for. Okay? I might not be right. I'm not saying, again, the point of this exercise is just to show that there are people out there who have the information, and we could use that to make some kind of a hashar. You don't have to take my way. I'm just we're going through the steps just to see what it came out of. Okay? So, we took those numbers and restructured them again to 1 by 100, and we came up with 200 countries to give names. Okay, this is, and then zeros, of course, the worst zero. Well, you weren't supposed to be zero. It's the bottom. All the way up to the top, the highest country here, according to this, was Sweden, was almost 100. Okay, according to these ratings, and the United States was there. The United States was doing in the 80s. Okay, was in the 80s. So to answer how corrupt or how good we are, then we're in the 80s. Okay, so this is all the countries according to this way of looking at them. Okay, and now I made up. The next thing is arbitrary, but I made this as follows. The way I rated it was, if a country was 80 to 100, that was considered high. This is just my way of doing it. 70 to 80 was borderline, 50 to 70 was weak, and less than 50 was really low. Okay? Pathetic, call it whatever you want to. Unacceptable. Really low. Okay? That's what I called it. Okay? So now let's look at those 33 countries that we had that export to the United States. Let's see where they fit into this thing. Okay? So the first is the highest. The countries with the highest ratings, there were a bunch of them. I don't remember how many there are, but you can look at the chart here. You see the kind of countries that you sort of expect to see there: Australia, Canada, Germany, Ireland.
Average was the number you chose.
What'd you say?
I don't know. 80 was the number you chose.
Okay. And you see on here countries, England. You see countries here that sort of. You see the Western Europe countries over there. I don't know if you can see them. Okay, you see, these are the countries that sort of we would expect, and these have the highest rating. So we say these ones seem to be like what in the United States, or we would think these are the most easily taken
on both of those
criteria. Yes,
How did you?
an average. I averaged those. I mean, I rated each one
equal
1 to 100.
This project and the other one.
I reassigned them to 1 to 100. They really weren't 1 to 100.
You combined them.
And I averaged them. Okay. They didn't each rate every single country. So I averaged it depending on what they were. Okay. And now these are the countries. Only 2 countries here that are yellow. They got the borderline. That's why he left, because Chile was going to be here. Okay. And yeah, his home country's coming soon. So these 2 countries that were borderline. Okay. Now, just for looks of it, just look here is that Portugal, which is in Western Europe, got into the borderline. Not with the rest of Western Europe. Just for understanding. Okay. Anyhow, so these are our borderlines. Then came our weak. Okay, and in the week, including what we've been talking about, is Poland. Okay, I don't know if you recognize Poland's up there in the yellow, up there in the middle. So these are the countries that were weak. That means they were 50 to 70.
Orange is yellow.
Orange. Did I say yellow?
No, it says a bit orange.
So press it again.
Yeah.
On my computer, it's orange. It doesn't show as orange over there. Okay, it's yellow. On my screen, it's orange. Anyhow, men are not going to call it anyhow. Don't worry. And then last is the countries that are weak. Okay, the lowest. And this lowest includes China, India, Mexico, Russia, Bangladesh. You know, you wouldn't believe that the United States, you say, yeah, whatever the United States takes, they must really know what they're doing. Okay, Bangladesh is on there. Okay, so most of us wouldn't really be confident that milk comes from Bangladesh. Is, you know, so we see here, so now we've seen that there's all different kinds of looking at this. According to my way of looking at it, again, just one choice of it, but within, again, what I'm repeating really is, it's going to end up being the same, really, to what Rabbi Heinemann said, but I'm trying to make it more scientific and help us. What do we do with Argentina? How would anybody know it's in Argentina? We're using this as a way of measuring it. To take milk from Brazil or Poland is questionable. They were borderline questions. To take stuff from China and India, Argentina, Mexico, Russia, Ukraine, these places which are all exporting, is really hard to justify according to the way of looking at it like this. If you hold up this 4th position, it's really hard to justify. That's why Rabbi Heinemann says he won't take from them. So his judgment, his off-the-bat judgment, is in line, so to speak, with this. And we're trying to make this sort of like quantifying it. Okay? And just one little note is...
Poland, from what I understand, Poland is as an up-and-coming country in regards to business.
Right, so this is 2012. So the question, up-and-coming might mean...
I'll say right now, their economy was at least, a few years ago at least, it was a stronger economy, it was a growing country economically.
And therefore?
So, obviously they have a very Western mentality in regards to business. So even though the government oversight might not be whatever it is that you're judging over here, but in regards to Heinemann's criteria of business-oriented, so
Radowski said, in particular, for the dairy industry, they're very careful about it. So it could be that that's true, but all I said at that point was just that we need to be able to quantify that and make sure we're really making the right decision about that. It might be true. We just need to...
The whole thing is just for the government law part of
the
it.
chlal, how people follow laws. It's not focusing on dairy. No, it's general. How do the people follow laws? How does the government enforce laws? And things like that. So if there's a
But
difference,
Yisrael says very other important factors.
it could.
Now he said when you do the
Right.
children of Moshe that the Moshe that lists the law is just also you need a law also but it's the fact that
I'm just saying is that this if you're saying that you need some kind of oversight, as Rebelsky himself is saying, and as Rabbi Heinemann is saying, that you need oversight, then how are we going to judge who's giving the oversight? I'm trying to say I'm suggesting that there should be we should use expert, objective way of looking at it rather than our own judgment on that. That's not a rabbinic judgment. That's an there are other people who know that better, and this is just a suggestion. It's not the answer, it's just a suggestion. Okay, so now I just want to throw in, just for whatever it's worth, one of Rebelsky's examples of countries that he would never take from was Rwanda. Okay, so it happens to be that according to what?
Why?
Well, according to the way these people rated, Rwanda did much better than a lot of countries that he considered to be okay.
how did Congo do?
Okay. I'll have to look back at my numbers. They don't export to the United States. That's it. But so Rwanda, just of all things. Anyhow, so just to close, is that it happens to be there's a number of people, as I mentioned, who have been thinking about this and working on this. Other people in Hashgacha. We're trying to put together. We're hoping to put together a meeting of Rabbanim HaMachshirim from different Hashgachas, sit and talk this out. Either to come to an understanding that everyone should do the same thing, or at least understanding of what everybody holds to each other. And people should at least, it should be clear, you do this and I do this, and we at least know what we don't agree about for themselves and for the public to have some understanding. So that we have hopes of getting there. So that's why others have been working on this. We have hopes of getting it.